Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. We bring back Anthony Lee, but this time we're going to be talking about copywriting. But before we get started, just remember to like, subscribe, and obviously leave us a comment under the video or any questions you have, and me and Anthony will come back to you. Let's get started. So welcome back, Anthony. What have you been up to recently?
Thank you for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be on Seller Sessions. What I've been up to is just crazy domestic stuff. I'm moving my family to Taiwan, so it's been setting up all the, getting the house ready for rental and getting our lodging and everything ready over there. And it's all the fun stuff of moving just, exponentially increased because it's overseas.
Okay, so let's get into the program. So let's talk about the psychology of copywriting. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so whenever I decided to get into copywriting, and the reason I did that was just because I liked writing when I was younger, and then learned that you could write for a living, and copywriters make more money than novelists. So I started reading these books by old school ad men, and man, most of them are free on the internet now, and they're just packed with awesome information. And one of the things that I learned that stuck with me, for years and years, I always come back to this. Copy is like the storefront window to your store, right? Mm-hmm. So if there are streaks in the glass, people are going to notice the streaks, and that's not good. Yeah. If it's completely clear, they don't notice the streaks, they notice what's behind the glass on display. Yeah. And that's essentially what copy is, right? So if your copy is lacking, people will notice the words. Mm-hmm. But if you did your job right, they're not even going to pay attention to what you said because they're just going to be picturing themselves using the product and wanting the product. And if you think about it, every experience you've had with advertising is the same way. How many times have you seen an ad of any kind, whether it be print or video, and thought that was a stupid commercial? Or instead of thinking that, looked at it and thought, that looks like an awesome product. I really want to look it up, and then immediately go Google it or whatever. That's this concept being illustrated. Anyway, so that's essentially the psychology of copywriting, is that you have to understand your goal, and your primary goal is to have the person reading the copy imagining and picturing them using or interacting with your product or service that you're writing about, rather than paying attention to what you're saying. Yeah. So after you have that idea in mind, after you understand that that is your ultimate goal, there are certain things to kind of focus on, right? Because just saying, hey, everything you write has to be, has to totally have some kind of an emotional response. That's kind of overwhelming. So one of the tenets of copywriting is write for the next line. So everything you write, the only thing that you're trying to have accomplished with that first line is to get the person to read the next line. Yeah. And then the next line, get the person to read the next line. That's your goal. So you have the overall psychology in mind. You want them to have a response that involves them mentally interacting with the product or service. And then the nuts and bolts of it is every line is written for the next line. Yeah. If you do these two things, your mindset is totally set and you can go to it.
Excellent. And so with that in mind, give some examples of different types of copywriting that people use.
Well, it's all basically you're writing for the platform, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about the mindset that the potential customer is going to be in based on that platform. For example, if you're writing for a website that is intended to educate people on something, and the bulk of your traffic comes from Google, which is the search engine of choice for most people looking to find answers to things, then the way you'll be writing is informative. Yes. Whereas if you're writing for your Shopify store, then the way you're writing is to convince the customer to buy your product.
Yeah.
And then it's even different from between Shopify and Amazon. Amazon, people are already there looking to buy. So for that platform, you're writing to get as many benefits in front of the user as possible to convince them to buy your product over somebody else's. So it's all about the platform that you're on and understanding the thinking of the person that's on that platform.
Yeah. I mean, there's sub niches there as well. So can you imagine writing your listing for the US, say, and we've got to be honest, the US is a bit more shiny in the way that you write stuff compared to, say, the UK, which is slightly more reserved, and equally more so in Germany. So you've got like sub niches there, because even though you'd write in one direction for said platform, you still have to change the tone. So how would you go about doing that, and what would you put in place?
Well, the only way you could successfully change the tone across platforms is to understand what that particular audience is looking for. But that's just going to take time and experience with the platform. But more important than that is speaking in the language that gets the person's mind thinking in the direction of picturing them using that product. And what I mean by that is, somebody who speaks one language, right? Let's say their native tongue, they also think in that language. So when you speak to them in informal native tongue, then it's easier for them to imagine what you're saying. Whereas if you speak to them in another language, even if they're fluent, there's an extra step in that mental process. And the same thing goes with speaking, on these listings and other platforms, right? Even if the language is in German, if you don't use the type of words that they use, it's going to be, they have to go through a translation process, right? So for example, between the US and the UK, right? In the US, we say add to cart. They don't say that in the UK. They say add to basket. You guys call it a basket, right? Well, if I say add to cart, that person immediately stops imagining themselves using my product or adding it to their cart, and they have to translate that to basket first. So it's extremely important that you actually use the language in the most natural form possible, so that the person reading it can have a better, it's just easier for them to then picture all the things you want them to picture instead of putting any translation barriers in between.
Yeah, well, I mean, as well as what you've got to look at is how salesy it is as well, haven't you? So, for instance, in Germany, you might have to be a bit more on point, being factual, rather than saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, how do you adapt for those kind of marketplaces?
Well, I think that there's a happy medium. Like, obviously, every audience is going to be different, but I think there's a happy medium between using sensational language and really getting facts across. If we're specifically talking about Amazon marketplaces, I truly believe that no matter what marketplace you're on, your information needs to be full of fact-based statements. And the reason why is because the goal, no matter what country it's in, of the Amazon shopper is to determine whether or not this product is better than this product. And that's when they look at things like the reviews and the star rating, and they also read your listings. So the fact-based stuff is, I think, pervasive across platforms. Now, as far as the fluff language that you use, I think that the best way to get behind, which one is more effective is to do market research within your niche. And the reason I say that is because even if the United States used more fluff language, for example, than Germany, every niche still reacts differently. Like, would you use the same floral language that you use describing the feeling of your skin when you use a vitamin C serum? Would you use that same floral language to discuss a hard drive? Probably not. And it doesn't matter what country you're in there. So you really need to do the research in your niche and find out what your competitors that are that are successful, that are selling, what they're saying and what they're using as their adjectives. And that, I mean, and that it's really that simple. I know that sounds like stupid or rudimentary, but it's actually that simple. You just always look at what guys that are doing what you want to do are achieving, and then adapt from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also important to understand. I mean, we're talking cross-platform here. I find on a personal level, as soon as I see one of those long form emails or long landing pages, straight away I'm turned off. And it's probably because I understand that people are doing marketing, but it's almost like, I think you've got to resonate with your customers as well. And it's not always easy to do that. And I think some people on Amazon can fall into the mistake of a one size fits all. So they might go, oh, right, I've been on a certain platform that encourages that kind of affiliate marketing style long pages. And so they're writing for it. And then they can't understand why the customers are not converting, because there's that element, you've got to build trust with the customer, isn't there? And so what's your take on that? Do you ever look at copy and go, oh, I just can't tolerate and read it and just like move on to the next thing?
Well,
so what are your levers when it comes to copy? What turns you off?
Well, the thing is I don't personally like all that big, long, spammy stuff, right? Yeah. But at the same time, sometimes I see listings with big, long, spammy titles, and you're just like, immediately you're like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. And they're ranking page 1, their BSR is sub 5,000. You know they're making money.
Yeah.
How is that possible? It's because I think the problem that most people have is they really complicate this whole copy thing, and it's really not that complicated, especially when we're talking about Amazon listings. Yes, there are right ways to do it, or righter ways, or ways that will convert more, but at the end of the day, it really is subjective, like whatever works for your audience. If having a big spammy title means that the spiders are crawling and you just get page 1 for a bunch of long tail keywords, if that's what happens and people are still buying even though it's a spammy title, then it works for you. And if that's what's happening in your niche, if that's how you have to stay ahead of the curve, then but as far as these rules that resonate with your audience, there's a thing that you have to understand. What we're talking about, this granular level of really resonating with your audience, is totally applicable when you're writing your website, when you're doing your Shopify, when you're doing your Google stuff. Well, we're talking about Amazon. These aren't actually your customers. These are Amazon's customers. And for the most part, even though, yes, every niche reacts differently because there is a level of resonating with your customer, it's a little more watered down because for the most part, these are still just Amazon shoppers. So what you want to do is kind of get a feel for the marketplace as a whole. What do these people generally respond to? To give you a real world example, so I sell baby carriers. That's my main product in the baby niche.
Goodbye, Anthony's listings now. No,
it's okay. It's super saturated now anyway. And on top of that, Amazon started requiring testing, and not everybody even knows how to do that. So anyway, I made the mistake of thinking, well, this one carrier does really well, so a bunch of other ones, the same product but different colors, will do well, because all my bigger brand competitors all have different colors and patterns too. And the colors actually, even though they get the best feedback, the colors actually all bombed. Well, I realized later, everything on page 1 is either black or gray. Then I started looking at other niches, sports gloves, black. Different types of accessories, black, gray. And then I realized that even though on some level I want to resonate with my audience, Amazon shoppers tend to buy neutral color stuff, probably because they can't feel it and try it on. They can't compare it to the color of their shirt in person. Whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. The point is there are certain rules for Amazon or platform shoppers. And then from there, there's kind of like a watered down version of how to speak to your audience. But understanding that is important because, one, it means that writing the copy is actually not as complex way more complicated when you get into your own website. You're going to want to really drill down, or more than likely hire a professional to help you. But on Amazon, it's not, like, because everything's kind of watered down in service level, it's not as complex as people try to make it out.
Yeah. Okay, so then with that in mind, let's talk about quickly before we break down of how to implement it into your listing. Talk about the prep work involved, because there's one thing of writing glossy, nice words, but then it's coming up with the glossy, nice words. How does one apply that?
Okay,
in terms of research, yeah.
Obviously, the first step I already mentioned, and that's really get to know your competitors, see what it is that they're doing. I recommend focusing on private label competitors, because your big brand competitors are always going to do things differently. They don't have to worry about speaking to the Amazon customer because their brand does it all. So what are the other third-party sellers, the other private labelers in the space doing, especially the ones that rise to the top? That's going to give you some idea. As far as what words to use, well, we're talking about Amazon. So as I mentioned before, Amazon shoppers are really just kind of looking for you to convince them to buy your product over the other. And this is going to involve a lot more fact-based stuff, because they're literally comparing the nuts and the bolts. They're looking at, okay, this one has 8 in the package, yours has 10, right? They're looking at things like that. So what words to put around it? I like to tell people to use the concept of weighted words. And when I say that, I don't know how many of your audience uses Twitter, but I think everybody's familiar with the platform. You only get 140 characters to say what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So you got to think, if you're trying to describe something, you can use a bunch of very simple words and then have to describe it in several sentences. Or if you have the Twitter mindset, you have to find words that are weighted. That means they mean a whole lot, and then you can say it in less characters, right? So instead of something being shiny and beautiful and clean and sparkly, you could just say it's magnificent. So you put all of these adjectives in one word. So you want to use weighted words and make it more concise. And the reason why is because on the Amazon platform, people's attention spans are, they're not there to read a novel. It'd be different if it was your website, because that means they've come to your website to learn all about you. But when they came to your listing, they only look to see how your product is better than the one right before it in the search results. So while you do want to offer both the customer and the spiders plenty of material to work with, you also want to get to the point quickly, working with a short attention span. So how you find those words is you want to speak in plain language. You want to make sure that it sounds like you're having a conversation with them, but you also want to be professional. So the way I tell people to do it is, when you're describing your product, pretend like you're describing it to your grandmother. So you're not going to use too much slang. You're not going to be too informal, but at the same time, it's a comfortable conversation. It's not like you're, being all.
Well, this is why they say you should read back your copy out loud, because you want to know what it really sounds like. Because I think a lot of people get clever with words and do paradigm shifting, hockey stick, etc., etc. Lots of business sites you can read, and it's just got lots of wanky words in there, isn't it? That you need to avoid that and just become, be straight ahead with the content that you're delivering.
Well, better than you reading it out loud is having somebody else read it. Because they alone are it's another person. They're an example of your average Amazon seller or buyer. They're not you. They're the customers. So they read it, and the best response you can get is if they read it and they go, "Tell me more about this product," because then that means the shop window was clean. But they'll let you know if they don't understand a word. That means it doesn't matter, what their education level is. If they're an adult, that means that you used a word that's just too complicated. You should find a new word. And if they get bored with reading it, that means that you were too verbose. So really, it's good to just get somebody else to look at it and then just be like, "Hey, what do you think?"
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk now about applying this to the listing. So we'll break them down: title, bullets, description. Walk us through how you would apply this and your thought process. So let's start with the title.
All right. Well, the first thing that you always have to remember is you're not just writing for customers, you're also writing for the spiders, which means that your copy has to be keyword rich. So this is presupposing that you've already done a adequate amount of keyword research and figured out what keywords are important for your product to rank for. Anyway, so with that, what you'll say in your title is, and this is not just my personal approach, this has been tested by one of the most effective ways to discover what works on Amazon is to just compare all of the top listings. What do they have in common? What do all the big sellers have in common? So one of the first things is that they all clearly identify what the product is. They get to the point quickly too. And the reason why is because across browsers and across devices, only a certain amount of characters show. In fact, because so many more sales are happening on mobile devices now, a lot of the top sellers only have 80 characters in their title, just because of the fact that that's all that the person sees. However, I don't recommend doing that, and the reason why is because there's a lot more going on behind the scenes now with the new indexing changes. So you want to make sure that you get to the point quickly. What is the product? As soon as you can. You may or may not choose to put your brand in there. A lot of people say don't waste the real estate because Amazon buyers aren't looking at brands. This is both true and untrue at the same time. It's one of those paradoxical statements. Amazon buyers are looking for the greatest value. However, e-commerce buyers, the research has already been done by much larger organizations than anybody that currently works in the Amazon industry. E-commerce buyers tend to buy online with brand loyalty, meaning the first place they look is a brand that they recognize. If you ever want your brand to be recognizable, you're going to have to start putting that brand name out there so that people can start recognizing it. So while it may not matter in the beginning, or it may not matter if you're flipping a bunch of different types of products for cash, if you're building a brand in 5 years, it absolutely will matter. So keep that in mind. But that's one of those optional things. What's not optional is making sure you get to the point using your most trafficked, most relevant keyword first so that it's there.
Yeah.
Fill up the rest of the title with more keywords, because there's always other things you can call your garlic press. It can also be a garlic masher, etc. So you want to use these other, pertinent, relevant keywords. But how you weave them in there is by also including benefits where you can. The example that I usually use when I discuss this topic is the pet brush. If you have a dog brush, or that's the primary thing that you're targeting, is that it's a dog brush. But it can work on any pet. You both get important keywords and convey a benefit by calling it, a pet brush for cats, dogs, bunnies, short and long fur,
horses.
Yeah. So what that just did right there was it got cat brush, dog brush, bunny brush, pet, grooming, all of those important keywords in the phrase. And it also conveyed the benefit that it works for all your whatever pet you have. So that's the kind of the mindset, right? That's what I was saying.
So it's basically covering neighboring keywords of your main domain. So you're looking after, say, dogs, but adjacent to that, you're picking up the other pets along the way. So that's good. And so let's talk about bullet points now.
Mm-hmm. So
you can elaborate a bit more here, can't we?
Because So bullet points. For starters, I want to give props to. There's a guy in the space, Dana Derricks. Now, this was a practice that we've all put into practice, but he coined the term, which I was actually impressed with because the term makes sense. Writing for a dual audience. And basically what this is the practice that we've engaged in for a while now, where you take a benefit and you shorten it so it's like as few characters as possible, and you put it in all caps, and then you put a dash, and then you elaborate on the benefit. And the reason you do that is because there will be some people that want to read as much information as possible about this product, and so the elaboration is there. But for the scanners, the people who are just scanning through, you want to touch the most important points immediately in all caps so that they don't have to sift for the information. You don't want them to miss anything either. So it's dual readership. You're targeting the short attention spans and the longer attention spans in one. So every bullet will have a benefit in all caps, and then after that, more of kind of an explanation of what that benefit is. So what I mean by benefit, this is one of the basic tenets of copywriting. What something is a feature. What it does for you is a benefit, right? And the reason you want to focus on benefits as opposed to features is because, remember, I said the goal is to get the person imagining that they're using this product. The only way you can do that is by explaining to them what it does for them, right? So a dog brush, what it is a grooming tool. But the benefit is less dander, less allergies. See how that's more impactful of a statement. So in all caps, I could put grooming tool, or I could put less dander, less allergies. Which one do you think is going to get more attention? Mm-hmm. So you should, if this is your
or
product,
you can say less knots. So or less knots.
Exactly.
When you're using it. Yeah.
But you should have, if it's your product, you should have a nice solid list of benefits, the things that that your product does or can do for people. If not, start with the features and convert them to benefits. So take everything that your product does, whatever it is, and then figure out what it does. What it does for people. Turn those into benefits, and then when you elaborate on them, all you're really doing is kind of going deeper in detail about how it does that thing. You don't want to get too long form copy on this part, and the reason is because a lot of it gets cut off by various outlines. Like for example, in mobile, only 3 bullets show anyway, and in a lot of browsers, it cuts off after a certain amount of characters, like 255 or something. So you don't want to get too verbose there, but at the same time, it's important to include as many mid-tail and long-tail search terms as possible. And the reason is because the spiders, like with the new indexing rules, we've discovered that the spiders are indexing more keywords if they're found both in your back-end search terms and in your listing. So there are guys out there that promote that all you need to do is optimize your listing for SEO, and then you'll increase sales by X, blah, 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 blah. And they're trying to tell you that the reason for that is because, the sales copy is what converts. And while there is a level of conversion there, most Amazon buyers don't really they're not paying that much attention to the sales copy, which is the reason why I say that connection's kind of watered down. What's happening that they don't realize is when you have a lot of sales copy, they are they're being indexed for more long tail keywords, and so they're ranking for more keywords, and the more keywords you rank for, the wider your visibility. So they're making more sales, but they think it's all because of their magic copy. It's not, which is why I keep trying to say this whole copy thing for Amazon is not that complex. It's literally because the spiders do so much more than they used to now. So it's really important for us to speak to them. So what that means is while you're going into this elaborate detail about, less knots, you want to actually use the full term, like this, pet grooming brush, right? This pet grooming brush provides your furry friend with less knots, so they're in less pain or whatever. So just make sure you use long and mid-tail keywords and pepper it out. So at this point, your SEO cap is on more than anything. But also make sure it makes sense. Like you don't want like a long list of keywords and people are like, what does that even mean? Just, it's got to make some sense. But it doesn't have to be like, famous copywriter like Frank Kern level sales copy. Like just say what it is, say what it does, and use the whole term. And don't worry about repeating the same term over and over again. Just try to get new terms in there, right? So if you already referred to it as a pet grooming brush, next time call it a doggy brush or a puppy brush or a kitty brush or et cetera, just so you could get that the SEO in there. And that, I mean, and that's really it. Like I know it sounds a little complicated, but it's not. It just requires keyword research.
And what about if we'll wrap on this point here, but description, it's a very contested area. Do you put much in the description? We know that the situation with indexation, maybe there's some character cap in there, maybe there's not, maybe there's a situation where it only shows so much on mobile. Is it worthwhile on desktop? Mobile apparently is about 70% now, so there should be something in the description as it shows the first maybe 130 characters depending on the device. So talk me through descriptions. What's your take?
The description area often isn't read a lot, right? It does look more professional when it's filled out. I definitely recommend putting things like technical specs or any sales copy you have in that section. But what you want to do is every available character you have, fill it, use it, find a reason to put those search terms in there because this is your SEO opportunity more than anything. The bullets have to be relatively concise and make sense because the bullets are still the features section that customers will read. But the description, be as verbose as you want because you want that SEO juice there. Obviously, you want it to look nice and make sense. But I mean, if you have a bunch of technical specs, put those in there. And then after that, put like a really long, paragraph about how awesome the person's life will be when they use this product. The point is they may read it and it may convert a sale once every, 2 months. It may not, but it'll get you more visibility because that SEO is super, super important. So definitely do not skimp on that. Fill out your descriptions to the fullest of your ability.
Superb. Okay, well, look, let's look at wrapping it there, and then we'll continue in part 2 in the second episode. Guys, remember to like, subscribe, and comment below the video. We can answer your questions. Anthony, again, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Take care.